Hello everyone, and welcome to another Liverpool Transfer Show on Football Talk Podcast. My name is Ozzy, and I'm your host for this evening. A few transfers to talk about, not huge developments from a Liverpool point of view, but we got some sort of breaking news in regards to Alexander Isak's demands uh, in regards to a new contract, whether it's at Liverpool or at Newcastle, wherever his destination is going to be. I will discuss that later on today. Ekitike has arrived for his medical, so we expect some sort of official announcement in due course. And it looks like Bayern Munich might be readying a bid for Luis Diaz. So let's get into it and let's speak about the first rumor. And as you can see, pound signs flying behind him in Alexander Isak. Now, the breaking news today was that he is demanding £300,000 a week to sign a new contract at Newcastle. Now, due to heavy interest from Liverpool, the striker is asking for a deal that would pretty much smash Newcastle's current pay structure and, of course, really put them in the mud when it comes to the PSR. So, what should Newcastle do? The obvious thing is to sell him because it makes perfect sense to do so from a financial point of view. Of course, you're losing a star striker in Isak, but with the funds that will be presented from the sale, you are able to reinvest into the squad and strengthen the squad even further than what you can right now because Newcastle are struggling to find players or trying to get deals concluded. They've been linked with the likes of Trafford, who I actually thought was a done deal, but it's not. It looks like he's on the verge of joining Man City. They've had João Pedro reject them. Ekitike has rejected him. Of course, he's joining Liverpool very soon. So, had they received, a bid or showed encouragement to clubs like Liverpool that, they're willing to do business, they could have easily gained £130 million, and that money could have been used very, very sort of rigorously throughout the squad. That could have addressed their, of course, you would sign a striker replacement, but you can also address other weak areas in their squad. Centre back is a position that needs to strengthen. An additional midfielder, would not be the worst case scenario in this situation. So, from a financial point of view, it would have made more sense for them to accept a bid, if Liverpool or any other team were willing to, splash the cash. Because I think Liverpool have done the right thing to present a official approach with Newcastle, but Newcastle seem to have rebuffed the sort of inquiry right away. So when that happens, Liverpool had to move on, and that's the reason why we're on the verge of signing Hugo Ekitike. Now, anyhow, he didn't say very smart comments, I would say, over the weekend, you know, to say that he sent Isak home because he was not in the right state of mind and the speculation was affecting him. So he thought the best thing was to send him home and not involve him in the preseason game. And today he's not really helped with further comments. So, in quotes, Eddie Howe said, "We love him as a player. We love him as a person. We want him to stay. I'd never give that guarantee to anyone because I've been in football long enough to know that I could end up looking very silly, so I won't do that." Now, for me, that doesn't sound very confident from a manager's point of view, and it would appear that Isak has voiced his frustration and is trying to engineer a move away from the club this summer. Now, there was a photo circulating today, as you can see. I know it's a bit, from distance, but you've got Isak training alone there with a couple of senior coaches. And the first rumor was that he's picked up a thigh injury, but from what I've heard, that's pretty much a white lie just to cover up the current situation, which is, of course, that he's not happy with Newcastle in terms of not accepting any bids or any approaches from other clubs. So he's clearly being punished, or he's been put to one side to train on his own. And when he comes to their terms and says that he wants to play for Newcastle and doesn't care if there's any bids, flying in or anything like that, then they'll probably open further discussions, or they'll bring it back to normal training with open arms, I guess. So let's see how that develops. Um, but the big question is, and this is what all of us Liverpool fans are asking, can we see Isak arriving to Anfield with, you know, with this flag or Sweden flag on our traditional Mercedes vehicle there. I, I would love to say yes, but I'm just trying to be a bit realistic. I don't think it will happen. It won't become a reality. If he is after that kind of paycheck, it's not going to come from Newcastle United. That would literally ruin anything in terms of further acquisitions to the squad, or you know engineering of any moves in the short term future, because it's not just this summer. It would affect the January window and maybe even affect next summer if they were to give him that kind of salary, because it would just yeah it would destroy their pay structure, and funds will be limited in order to either extend our players' contracts or sign our players in the near future. So for me, um, I have a feeling he'll end up at Saudi. I don't think it's the right move, but I feel like he's probably thinking at this stage, if Saudi can offer me big, big money, who am I to turn it down? That's what he's probably thinking right now. So let's see what happens. We've got this development today in terms of what his financial requirements are. His agent's been very vocal and has said that they're working on a few things, and we should get some clarity this week. So expect to hear further news, or maybe other clubs interested. Only time will tell. But it doesn't look like um, Isak, is in favour of staying at Newcastle. I think he'd love the fact that he could join Liverpool, but can Liverpool make that bid? We have the funds. We can certainly do it, but I think with the signing of Ekitike, I feel like the focus will be elsewhere now, because Luis Diaz is possibly leaving Liverpool as well. So we need to find a natural replacement for that left wing, and then we need to address the defense area as well. Maybe midfield, but I don't think midfield will be addressed this season. So let's see what happens. Before we move on, just got a few comments here from Fozzy as well. Big up Fozzy, says, "Yo, bro, I hope all is good." I'm good, thank you, Fozzy. Hope you're doing good as well. Fozzy saying he's injured. Silver, bro. Well, let's see. Newcastle fans have been quite cheeky, saying that Liverpool fans are going to cry right now because he's injured and that move's not going to happen. But look, if he's injured, then it doesn't help them in any shape or form, does it? So let's see what happens. I don't feel like this is the end of the saga. I think Liverpool have a slim chance, if they get the word from Isak that he only wants to move to Liverpool. That way we can kind of force the move, and we might not even have to bid over the odds. We can probably give them still a substantial offer, like 120 million, but it just won't be what they wanted, which would have been 140, 150 million pounds. So it's going to be interesting. I just don't feel like we're going to pursue Isak any further this summer. In terms of being a future target, why not? He could definitely be someone we look at maybe in the January market if we need extra firepower, or maybe we look at a striker addition next summer. So let's see what happens. But feel free to let me know in the chat. What do you think is going to happen with Isak? Do you think Liverpool have a genuine chance of signing him? Feel free to let me know. Now let's move on to some official news. More or less, not rumor now, is Hugo Ekitike. Now Ekitike and his agent Carl Molako flew in this morning to Liverpool. They have a 6-year contract ready to sign, so that will probably be done earlier today. The funny thing, or the interesting thing that I saw today was that, well, that's not the funny thing. This is actually quite cool, where he was wearing a retro shirt um, with Steven Gerrard's original number of 28. Um, this was the funny thing that I saw earlier today, was that Gary Neville tried to convince Hugo Ekitike to come to Manchester United, according to Honesty. Now, I don't know if that is genuine or that's a reliable source in terms of Anfield papers, but that made me chuckle, where you've got other candidates trying to speak to the player. I don't know if there's any truth there, but I did find it quite funny. But the Manchester United rumor wasn't just paper talk. There was genuine interest. They didn't try to hijack the deal, but they did try to speak to the player whilst Newcastle and Liverpool were is trying to have a discussion with him, but clearly Arne Slot's PowerPoint presentation blew him away, and that's what's been the talking point where he's presented how he sees Ekitike fitting into the team, and he visions him to be our talisman going forward, and that's why I feel like Isak isn't going to be the player we signed this summer. We could sign another striker. I just don't think it will be of Isak's quality or ilk. I don't think it'll be that type of caliber of a striker. It'll just be someone that covers for Ekitike, who I think we've got very, very high expectations of. So let's see what happens. But what was interesting today is that Fabrizio Romano reported Liverpool will make more signings after Hugo Ekitike, and that is music to our ears because I don't think we're done. Royal fans are hoping that we are, but that is not the case. We still have a defender that needs to be added to the squad. We still need, I would still say we need another attacker, if I'm being brutally honest. A versatile attacker would be someone that fits the bill. And if Luis Diaz does leave, then we will need a direct replacement for him as well. So I've said it quite a few times. I think we'll sign three more players uh, after Ekitike by the end of this window. So let's see what happens. Looking forward to um, seeing more players linked with the club, and hopefully, we can get those deals done very, very quickly as well. Let's speak about Luis Diaz. So currently, the rumor is that Bayern Munich are willing to place an improved bid of £65 million for Luis Diaz. Now, the big question is that enough to prize the Colombian winger away from Liverpool? I think there needs to be add-ons included to that deal. It can't just be a total amount of 65 million. The club value him around 75, 80 million pounds. So for me, that's below the asking price. So I'm not entirely sure that will be accepted. Bayern will need to offer at least 70 million plus add-ons, in my opinion, for any further negotiations. But they seem to be confident that they can get a deal done. Remains to be seen. Of course, Luis Diaz, if you believe the rumors, has voiced his frustration about not being given a new contract and has actually accepted the proposal verbally from Bayern Munich. He's liaised with Vincent Company, and he seems to be, you know, uh, the project really appeals him, and it feels like he can go over there and make a difference. Of course, money talks as well. He's been offered a bumper contract where he will be earning 250, 230 a week. So that is a 170 pay rise per week in comparison to what he's earning now, roughly. So in terms of his point of view, I understand. He wants to make that move where he'll get a better financial package, but he gets to play at one of the biggest clubs in Europe and will compete in the Champions League as well. So let's see what happens with Diaz. I would like him to stay. I do really rate him, but I feel like the writings on the wall is just too much has been done on his part, but also I feel like Liverpool have probably been a bit fed up and feel like this is the time to move on. When the club aren't willing to offer him a new contract or improve terms on his current one, so why keep him on board? So I think we'll see or we'll hear some sort of agreement or some sort of further developments in this rumor. I believe I think we'll get some confirmation about Luis Diaz joining Bayern Munich or a serious bid coming in from Saudi. I think those are the two sort of reliable or expected outcomes in regards to Diaz leaving Liverpool. So let's see what happens. But I unfortunately do expect him to leave this summer. And a player that I feel like we will regard as our number one target to replace him is Rodrygo. Now, the current rumor is that there are direct talks taking place between Liverpool and Rodrygo's camp. Um, Apparently, there hasn't been any talks between the clubs, but the interest is growing, and Liverpool are trying to understand his situation and want to find out if Rodrigo would be interested in a move to Liverpool. So we haven't got any sort of further developments in regards to that. You would assume and hope that he would be excited about joining a team like Liverpool, where it's a exciting project. It's a club that's definitely on the up. They've of course just won the Premier League, so it should meet his ambitions and tick all his boxes. So it remains to be what happens with Rodrygo. I feel like he could be a good addition to our squad. He can definitely challenge for that left wing role, which is a position that he wants to play. Uh, but of course, his versatility could be required at some point of the season. He can play on the right wing. He'll play as a striker as well. So for me, Rodrigo would be a very smart signing. He's valued at around 70 to 80 million pounds. So pretty much, the return that we're expecting from Diaz will be spent on Rodrigo. Eh, financially will be like for like, and even from a playing point of view, you've got a like for like replacement there as well. So I'm expecting some further developments once we get clarification on the Diaz deal. If that deal is agreed between Diaz, Liverpool, and Bayern, then I expect Liverpool to not waste any time. I expect them to replace Luis Diaz quite promptly, and I think they've earmarked Rodrigo as the number one target. Another player that was regarded as a potential Luis Diaz replacement is Malick Fofana. But we've got some further news regarding that. Now, apparently, that's not the plan from Liverpool's point of view. They actually plan to sign Malick Fofana to replace Chiesa. And that's a very interesting prospect there. And the tweet I saw earlier on today, they regard him as a player that could be a super sub for Liverpool. He's going to be that player where he won't be a starter, but he'll be a player that is on the bench and will come off the bench to be impactful and provide versatility by playing in different roles for the team. So my thoughts on that kind of deal appeals to me a lot more. Whenever we speak about Diaz potentially leaving Liverpool and we start listing replacement, whenever the name Malik Fofana comes, I just don't feel like it aligns with Diaz's quality. So I always feel like that's not the caliber player we should be signing to replace Diaz, because Diaz was a very important player for us last season. So we have to replace him in terms of quality, but in terms of the output, to make sure that the person that comes in is able to match his goals and assists and his impact in the team. So for me, that's going to be very, very key. But with Chiesa potentially leaving Liverpool, of course, he's not even been um, flown to Japan. He's not part of the tour for Liverpool right now. So he's currently at Liverpool. Apparently, he picked up an injury against Stoke City in the behind closed doors friendly. I'm not sure what to make of that. I feel like there's interest in the player, and I'm sure there's interest from Italian sides. So it looks like that could be his next destination. I would like Chiesa to stay because I still feel like he's got something to give. I feel like he's got the quality, and I feel like having him as a player in the squad would actually be quite useful. Having his experience amongst the players within the squad, and also he can play across the front line. He can play as a striker. He can play on the left, right, as a number 10. So he covers a number of positions. So for me, keeping Chiesa would make a lot of sense. But if he does desire to leave and wants to return to Italy, I think Malik Fofana would be a fantastic replacement for him. He shouldn't cost a lot due to Leon's financial situation right now. I know they've been reinducted back to Liga, but they still need to make sure they're able to clear their debt. So that gives Liverpool the opportunity to inquire about the player, see how much he'd cost. I would say he'd be available for around 20, 25 million pounds, which is not too much. In terms of Chiesa, we'll probably receive about 15 million, 15, 20 million. So I think Fofana will cost a little bit more, but pretty much around the same range, if the Chiesa was to depart. So in terms of what Malik Fofana would bring to the table, he's predominantly a left winger, but he can play on the right wing and he can play very effectively, very quick, low sense of gravity. So I feel like he would be a great player for us to have on the bench. Can play up top if required, but I feel like he's more of a winger. He likes to attack behind the defense, and that's something we don't really have in our squad. We don't have a lot of players that have that capability. So for me, Malick Fofana would be a very, very smart signing. So I'm hoping there is some truth to this rumor. I'm also hoping that we can add Rodrygo to the mix, and it kind of just completes our front line even further. So exciting times. Let's see what happens in regards to um, Malick Fofana potentially joining Liverpool. Just give me 1 second, guys. Uh, I need to plug in my charger. So give me 1 second. Apologies, but we would have gone off very instantly if I hadn't done that. I can see we've got a few comments here. Let's go through the comments before we move on to the next rumor. Um, and Uncle Rod's TV says, big up, Uncle Rod. I hope you're doing well. Ian came up. Ian, he says, Rodrigo's wages are reportedly 10 million net. It will be more like Fofana. We seriously need to start selling players before all these further ambitious signings. It's a good point, and it probably puts us Liverpool fans, away from cloud nine and back to reality a little bit because Rodrigo's wages are going to be quite high. I think he gets paid around 200K a week. Um, so we'll have to make some sales definitely in order to, not go surpass our wage structure. But because we haven't recruited that many players over the years, we've had the likes of Thiago, Matip, who are, on high wages. They weren't replacing the squad. So they were earning, I think Thiago was earning about 200K himself. And Matip was earning around 100 or so, 150, I think he was earning per week. So, that sort of money that was used for their wages is still available in terms of our transfer budget. So I think we should be fine. I think we are trying to recruit players first and then make sales from there onwards. So I do expect Darwin Núñez to leave. Of course, he's a high earner. Luis Diaz might not be one of the highest earners, but of course that still frees up, the transfer budget in terms of paying off the salaries of upcoming players. And then Harvey Elliott is another player that could be leaving. Chiesa, he's on big wages. He's possibly leaving. So I feel like we can definitely balance the books. That shouldn't be a concern for Liverpool. We haven't spent much over the last few years, so we have the revenue to cover transfer fees as well as the wages as well. So I'm not too concerned about this. I think, like Malick Fofana, if we were to sign him and Rodrigo, Malick Fofana wouldn't command a huge salary. Rodrigo would be regarded as a high-profile signing, so of course he would, you know, asked for around 200K, or I don't probably asked for about 250 to be fair, minimum. He wouldn't want to match the same salary that he was earning at Real Madrid. So I think we'll be fine in that regards. Liverpool have the funds and the revenue to balance the books and try and get the players that they need within their squad. Now on to the next rumor is regarding Ibu Kanate. So the latest in terms of Ibu Kanate is more or less about his future at the club. And the constant theme is that Real Madrid are doing their best or doing the groundwork to make sure he plays out the remaining year of his contract in order to facilitate a free transfer move to the Spanish Giants. And then we've also got some updates in the last few days that Real Madrid may try to sign him a year early and have inquired about that possibility. But today we've got some news from David Lynch, and he mentioned that there's a feeling within Konate's camp that uh, there is still a possibility of Konate signing a new contract, and from their point of view, that is the priority. They are currently in talks with the club, but no progress has been made as of yet. So that's a concern for me. Where when you hear that no progress has been made, that doesn't indicate anything good, in my opinion, because Konate was presented with a contract earlier on in the year, and he actually announced it or confirmed it, I should say, in a press conference that a contract has been tabled, it just hasn't been signed. So maybe he deemed that as, below his expectations or his valuation, where he feels like maybe he should be earning a lot more than what was presented. So for me, it is a concern regarding Konate because I really want him to stay. I think he's one of the best defenders in Europe. That's how much I rate him. So to replace him is going to be a big task, and I don't really want a Trent Alexander-Arnold saga where we start the season, he's not signed a new contract, and then we're asking questions: Is Konate going to stay? Is he not? I don't want that to be another topic of conversation this season. So if he wants to leave, I feel like he needs to give the club an indication because maybe we're able to sell him this summer rather than wait until it's too late and then we end up getting nothing for him because we can't do a deal in January because he will be eligible to sign a pre-contract agreement with a European side. So it doesn't look like that would be a feasible. So if he does stay at Liverpool, I would think that he'll most likely leave at the end of next season. But feel free to let me know in the chat. I don't think that's the best scenario. But of course, the benefit would be that we still have Konate in the team. We still have a fantastic defender in order for us to challenge for titles next season. But it wouldn't end well. I don't feel like that's the way we want to see Konate leave the club as well. Um, and he might get that same treatment that Trent Alexander-Arnold got because with him we felt like we were being led on, and that, of course, resulted to frustration and then anger in the end from a lot of Liverpool fans. So for me, I wouldn't want to sell him, but if there's an indication or any inkling from his camp that they're not willing to sign a new contract, and in terms of what they want and what the club want to offer, the valuation is like miles apart. It might be worth trying to sell him this summer. It's not going to be easy task because you have to inquire with other clubs. You gotta make sure you've presented the right kind of deal. You don't want him to go for peanuts as well because I feel like if he goes for around 30, 40, 50 million pounds, maybe it's worth keeping for the year as we'll benefit of having him in the team. And if we were to win trophies, that money could be regenerated very quickly. 50 million is not going to be a huge sum of money. So in terms of when you win a lot of trophies, so let's see what happens with Konate. But I'm praying and hoping he stays. I just don't feel as confident, unfortunately, just because we've not really had any positive news coming from his side. So yeah, only time will tell. But this rumor will definitely be prolonged to this summer, um, because it involves Real Madrid. So you just never know what's going to happen. But hopefully, we'll get some positive news by the end of this window. Just got a couple of comments here from Ian King. Says, who in Europe is going to buy Nunes with a price tag north of 60 million? I don't even think 60 million is that crazy, to be fair. The current team was Juventus, but I don't see them spending that kind of money. It's going to be very difficult to try and get that kind of transfer fee for Darwin Núñez. The only way we would get that kind of money is with Saudi. That's the only option you have where they can offer you big money and or we present a valuation of the player and then they'll match it. In Europe, we'll have to lower it. I think the club would be willing to accept around 50 million. I think the reason why it's been communicated 60, 65 is because you always got to, add the benchmark. You could always got to present a higher price in order for the team to come in to negotiate a deal, and then you try to meet in the middle in their eyes, and then you end up getting 50 million, which is what we wanted out of the deal anyway. So I think that would be the price range in terms of selling Darwin Núñez. Napoli would have been the team, but they've already signed a striker. Atletico would have been a team, but Griezmann has decided to stay at the club now. So the options are slim. Juventus are the latest teams to show interest. Newcastle were also a team that showed interest. If Newcastle end up selling Isak to Saudi, for example, then this is a possibility. But I feel like a move to Al Nassr in Saudi is a possibility as well because they are managed by his former coach in Jorge Jesus, and that was the coach that brought the best out of him when he was at Benfica. So that could be, two individuals being reunited once again. So it'll be interesting. 60 million. I hope we get that kind of range, but I'm not sure, if it's a possibility. But we'll see. There's also an inkling that maybe he'll stay for another season. I, for one, don't want that to be the case. I think it's time that both the player and the club part ways, and he can move on and progress his career somewhere else. So we'll see what happens with Darwin Núñez. In came with another comment says centre half positions are worrying with Konate's situation. Then you factor in with real trepidation injury record of Gomez. This has to be sorted very soon, and it's a real problem for me. It does. I feel like Gay is the one that we're going to add to our squad as a replacement for Kwanzaa, who's of course moved on to sign for Bayer Leverkusen. Ideally, you'd want two centre backs because of, as you mentioned, Trent. Why have I got that guy's name in my head? Joe Gomez. Um, his sort of injury record because he's not been fit for quite some time, and to have him listed as one of your four centre backs seems like a bit of a risk. So I feel like maybe signing a sort of a young up and coming defender would make the most sense. But having said that, this might not be a popular opinion, but maybe we see Robertson being listed as a fourth choice centre back option, or fifth choice. I would assume because it would be, let's say Gay is the player that we signed, so it would be Virgil, Kanate, Gehi, Joe Gomez, and then Robertson ends up being the fifth choice where he covers, if Joe Gomez isn't available. And then you still hold on to Simicas because, in terms of being a backup for Kirk, it's not a bad option. I've not really heard any, rumors surrounding Simicas leaving the club anytime in recent weeks. So that could be an option where, on paper, Robertson is regarded as a fifth centre back choice, but also is back up to Kirkes, and then Simicas is, I guess, third choice or a squad player within the ranks. So who knows? Let's see. We'll get some further indication because if there is interest in Simicast, then we know Robertson is just going to predominantly play as a left back. But due to the game against Preston, maybe that's a slight indication that he could be utilized in that role. Another comment from Ian King says Juve only want him on loan. That's correct. They want him on loan, but I think the contract or the agreement would also involve an obligation to buy. But what that fee is, we don't know. If it is sort of like 50 million at the end, then I think it would be a good deal because they'd have to pay a loan fee plus have that obligation to buy him at the end of the contract. So that wouldn't be the worst case scenario, if I'm being honest. But then again, I feel like we need that money to reinvest into the squad. Um, the Ekitike deal, I'm assuming the Nunes sale would have helped cover that sort of spending there. And then in terms of Luis Diaz leaving, we'd want a good amount of money for him in order for us to replace him with a Rodrygo, that type of player. So yeah, I'm expecting both players to leave at some point this summer. In terms of destination, very unclear. For Diaz, it looks like it could be Bayern. I think Nunes might end up at Saudi. If I was to name a club, I'd say Al Nassr. I think that's the club where he ends up joining. So let's see what happens in regards to Darwin Nunes. On to the next rumor, and it is Mark Gahey. So his name is always going to circulate regarding links to Liverpool. The latest that we're hearing is that Crystal Palace would rather cash in on Gay this summer than lose him for free next summer. So that would be an indication that Liverpool should be, you know, making inquiry very, very soon. Also, I saw some news earlier on regarding Crystal Palace that they're very close to signing Osman Diomande. So, that is definitely the player that they're going to replace Gay with. And it might also be the reason why there's been a delay in any official bid or any official discussions between Liverpool and Crystal Palace regarding the deal for Gay because maybe it's something that's been happening in the background, but they wanted to secure the signature of his replacement, and then they can talk about Gay potentially leaving the club. So that's what I feel like has happened. I feel like there has been talks in the background, so we'll just have to wait um, in due course and see if there's any development. I have a feeling we might get some news later on this week in regards to Liverpool making an inquiry or placing an official bid, and we should be able to wrap that up very very soon. Liverpool are still in Asia next week. I don't think he'll be, finalized in time for that. But maybe once they return from the Asian tour, that will be the time to get you on board, and then he can, join the club at that kind of time when they've returned back from Asia. So let's see what happens. I expect Gay to be a Liverpool signing if I'm here to make a prediction. It it, it looks like the player has agreed terms if you believe some of the rumors. I feel like all the signs, are pointing from Gay's side that he wants to join Liverpool, and hopefully, we could make that a reality very, very soon. Uh, Lewis, big up Lewis. He said loaning Darwin is a terrible deal. It is. The only reason I said it could be an okay deal only because if there was an obligation to buy where they have no choice but to pay 50 million at the end. But I wouldn't be too pleased with that deal either because I feel like we need that money right now in order to finance other deals. We've got to pay off the Ekitike deal as well. That's not going to just, happen through, you know, John Henry's bank account. They will want to try and, balance the books. And with Luis Diaz also linked to the club, um, you'd expect us to sign a replacement for him as well. So I agree. I don't think that's the best deal. Would you rather loan him out or would you rather have him for one more season? That would be the big question there. And feel free to let me know in the chat because it could be a reality. I'm not trying to, put that energy out there because I want him to leave. I think it's the right time for Darwin Núñez to leave, and I think it's the right time for Liverpool to move on and add another striker to the squad. But it could be in a sort of a position where we end up keeping him for another season because maybe we're prizing him out of a move away from the club. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, in an ideal world, I think allowing Darwin Núñez and Diaz to leave on a permanent basis makes the most sense. So hopefully we'll get some developments in the coming days. And the final rumor that was circulating just before I went live is regarding Charlie Cresswell. Now, this young defender is currently playing for Toulouse. He is also an England under 21 player as well. Apparently, Liverpool's recruitment team have been on his radar. They've scouted it several times last season. He's just recently moved to Toulouse. I think he was actually recruited by a former sporting director in Damien Comolli. I'm sure that's a name that rings a bell. So my thoughts on the rumor, a bit random. Not seen him much in action, to be fair. I watched the compilation before we went live. Seemed all right. Nothing special. Didn't really move me. He could be on paper regarded as an alternative for Gay if we're not able to get that deal done because he ticks that homegrown quota deal requirement as well, and seems to be an interesting profile. 22 years of age, very young. He's already made a move to a foreign club, so he clearly has some level of ambition and wants to progress in his early part of his career. But for me, I'm not too sure about this one. There was no sort of fee attached to this story. I feel like it's paper talk. Maybe his agent's trying to engineer a move back to the Premier League, or he's trying to get his client a better contract because he did have a decent sort of last few months with Liga. It's more so maybe trying to get some interest from a Premier League side. But with it being Liverpool, I very, very highly doubt it. So I don't see there being any truth to this rumor whatsoever. And that is it today in terms of our rumors. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Thank you to Fozzie as well. Thank you to Uncle Rod's TV. Thank you to Ian King, and thank you to Lewis Alexander. Appreciate your engagement as always, guys. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. In terms of upcoming shows, I will be doing another show tomorrow, hopefully. Transfer related, of course, unless there's breaking news. I'm sure we'll get an Ekitike official news. So in that regards, it'll be a bit more of a celebration type of show, and we can also discuss any relevant rumors or news regarding Liverpool's transfer activities. So make sure to look out for that. Time will be probably around 10, 11 p.m. That's normally my time slot for my shows. So best thing to do is hit that notification bell so you know what time I'm going live. And you can also follow me for all the latest updates at aussie.ftp on Instagram and also aussie underscore FTP on X/Twitter. Just got one final comment here before we close the show from Ian King. He says, total wage will have to be funded by loan club if this indeed becomes worst case scenario in respect of Darwin this summer. That's the thing. When you do these sort of loan deals, generally speaking, it's not always 100% from the parent club. And if you look at records or deals that have involved Italian teams, they don't normally pay the 100%. They'll pay about 50% or 40%. I think that's as far as they go. So let's see. I don't think that's the best case scenario. I think he, should leave this summer. If not, it might be a last resort. But because there's interest from Saudi, I feel like he will end up moving there because he'll know he's not valued at the club and he's not able to get a move within Europe. Then best thing for him to do is move over to Saudi, banging the goals there, and maybe he'll be able to engineer a move back to the Premier League, well, probably not Premier League, but maybe back to Europe at some point in the near future. I think that would make the most sense for Darwin Núñez. So, let's see what happens. If he goes over to Saudi, he'll get, great salary, of course, sign-on fee, lifestyle, weather. It ticks all the boxes there. He'll play in a league where it's not as competitive as the European League, so he should be, smashing in the goals left, right, and center. And that could, maybe encourage a European side to sign him in the next season or two. He's still very young, 25, 26. So, you know, some will say, it's not the best move at this stage of his career, but he doesn't really have many options, unfortunately. So it might be the best case scenario to move over there and see what the future holds. But from a Liverpool point of view, a loan deal doesn't make the best sense for me. So let's see what happens. But yeah, I'm not sure if that loan deal is the right move for Liverpool. Just got a comment here from Felix. Big up Felix. He says Rodrygo is a very mediocre player. He lives off his nationality like other Brazilians. Fair enough. I don't rate him as highly as a lot of people. I think he's a good player, but I don't categorize him as top class or world class or elite. Like he's not in that category for me. He has the potential to get to that level at some point, but I haven't seen it so far in his career. So I think mediocre might be a bit strong in terms of how I would, describe him. I think he's a good player, but I feel like if he was to come to Liverpool, he'll be at a club where he's given the foundations to really excel in our team and play in his favorite role, which is left wing. And I feel like he could be quite impactful in our team. So we'll see. But big up yourself for your comment there. Kieran, big up Kieran says, hello, Z. Rodrygo isn't mediocre. Come on, that's a bit harsh. I agree. I don't think he's mediocre. I did mention that to Felix. I do think that's a little bit harsh. I would say, he's a good player, but has the potential to become world class or to that kind of level. I just feel like he needs to move at this stage of his career because if he remains at Real Madrid, he probably won't get as many games. Alonso hasn't even played him in the Club World Cup, so he's definitely out of favor right now. So therefore, why stick around and become a bit part player. And unfortunately, when that happens to certain players, they become the forgotten people as well. So you don't want to be a Ceballos. You know, he's a player that had some level of promise early in his career. Now he's just a squad player, makes little cameos here and there. That's pretty much it. So you don't want to be, that kind of player, that becomes forgotten, or especially if you've had so much high promise in the early parts. So for me, I think Rodrigo is going to be our number one target, and I feel like he's the player that we should be looking toward because he's available. I think he fits the bill in terms of what we need in our team. I'm also, appealed by or should I say, excited by the rumor of Malick Fofana being signed as Chiesa's replacement. So imagine having Fofana and Rodrigo on the bench. Yeah, we've got some decent cover there for our first choice attackers in the team. So for me, that would be a great bit of business again from Liverpool, and that's probably not the last time I'm going to say that. I think in this transfer window. Felix says, I mean, Rodrigo's work rate is terrible. I don't think it's terrible. Attackers aren't predominantly known to have the best work rate when it comes to defensive duties, but maybe it's a mentality thing where when a club is, or when I say, or what should I say, when a player is presented with confidence from the coach or from the club in general, you know, that gives them that extra 10% to work harder for the team. So when he's loved by the fans and the coach has complete belief in him, that's when you see a player that really wants to fight for the badge. And I feel like Rodrigo has done that for Real Madrid. He might not have done it consistently over the years, but I don't think his work rate is terrible. I think that's a little bit harsh as well. Kieran says Rodrigo has been around for a long time now. Sometimes I forget he's still only 24. Yeah, we were actually linked with him when he was at Santos around when he was 18 years old, I think. So yeah, he's been around for a while. Kieran says works harder than Mbappe and Vinny. I probably agree with that. Um, Vinny for me just looks like he's lost a bit of pace about him. He's not really that kind of dynamic player. Like he doesn't have that burst of speed. Maybe because yeah, I'll give him the benefit of that because he's had such a long season and he's been asked to play in the World Cup. Maybe he's fatigued and not as fresh as he normally is. But what I saw during that competition, yeah, he looked like a shadow of himself. So yeah, I agree. I think Rodrigo does work harder than two players you mentioned there. Hookslaw, big up Hookslaw. He says, "Do we know what Rodders is asking in wages?" Who's Rodders? Is Rodders? Are you referring to Isak? Feel free to let me know in the chat, Hookslaw. I'm not sure who Rodders is. Um, but yeah, in terms of Isak, that he's asking for 300k. So I'm not sure. Would he get that Liverpool? Let's say Liverpool want to go ahead and place that bid. Are we willing to offer 300k? Oh, Rodrigo, apologies. It's been a long day. In terms of Rodrigo, he's currently earning 200k a week. So from a logical point of view, you'd assume that he'd want a pay rise and you're expecting around 250k plus, or maybe around that 300k mark. Now, that's the big question I was going to present because we need to sign another attacker after Ekitike as well. I very highly doubt that Liverpool would be in the market for Isak and Rodrigo because then you'd be paying two players 300k a week, which would be an astronomical increase in our pay in our wage structure. So I think it'd be one or the other. So feel free to let me know in the chat who you'd prefer. My answer would definitely be Isak because that's one of my favorite strikers right now. But I think in terms of balance for the team, it might end up being Rodrigo because I feel like we need a left winger. We've got the striker now in Ekitike. We need a left winger now to replace Diaz. So who knows what happens? Kieran says I would guess about 250, 300k. Yeah, that's exactly what I've just said now as well. That is the range that I'm expecting as well. Buffalo Soldier Beer. So it says Rodgers' work rates not good for what Slot's looking for. If that's the case, then he might not be a Slot profile then. But I don't think it's that bad. And a lot of people that have watched me over the last couple of weeks, they probably think I hate Rodrigo. Of course, that's not the case. That's a bit too strong. But because I've not, spoken about him very highly, um, a lot of my viewers think I don't rate him. But I feel like the work rate part is a bit harsh. I'm not saying he's like a Mane where he's, running around everywhere to help out his team. But I don't think it's that bad. I think he does work hard for his team. Maybe not to the highest of levels, but I think it's a tad bit harsh. That's just my opinion. Phoenix says, I was told Ekitike is not a reliable scorer, not much more reliable than Darwin. I think that's harsh as well. Um, he's an upgrade to Darwin Nunes in every area of the game. Ekitike might not be the most prolific striker, but he scored 15 league goals last season. He's shown that he has the tools to become that prolific striker. Last season was pretty much his breakout season where he was given, a huge run of games. He was the main guy at the club. And I feel like that's where you saw his true capabilities. And I feel like the potential was always there over the years, but last season he pretty much announced himself. So I'm excited about the signing of Ekitike. He's a lot better than Darwin Nunes. I don't think Darwin Nunes probably has, some better traits in terms of his speed and his aggression in some certain parts of his game. But I think when we're speaking just finishing, I think Ekitike is a better finisher than Darwin Nunes, whereas Darwin Nunes is more of a striker that likes to just smash the ball, in any given situation. Ekitike is a bit more measured, a bit more composed. If you look at his goals that he scored last season, they were not smashed with the laces. They were pretty much passing to the goal with real pace. He's that kind of finisher, the clinical finisher in my eyes. So I don't think that it's the same comparison. I know that's what a lot of fans have said because Ekitike had a purple patch season last year, and then we end up. It was kind of the same scenario with Darwin Nunes, where he had a purple patch, and then we signed him, and he failed to deliver. So people are trying to align it in that way. For me, it's not the right comparison. I think Ekitike is an upgrade to what we have in the squad, and that is, Darwin Nunes. He's a better player all round, in my opinion. Hooks Law says 250 for Ekitike seems very inflated given his German wages. Problematic if he flops. Yeah, it is a big salary, but that's why I feel like we've always regarded him as the main target. We probably thought Isak was never an option, but because we got a slight inkling that they might want to do business, then we showed an approach or an official approach with the club. But in the end, they rebuffed us and we've moved on, and we've ended up signing. I think would have been one of our main targets anyway. Um, yeah, in terms of the wages, I mean, from a Liverpool point of view, 250 sounds a lot because we know a lot of players don't earn that kind of range. But if you look at United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, the average players are earning that kind of salary. So I wouldn't dwell on it too much. For me, as long as he is given a chance to showcase his talent and lead the line and play to his natural game, then I'm excited by that prospect more than how much he's earning. As long as he bangs in the goals, that's what counts for me. Uh, Kieran says, to be fair, Ancelotti isn't exactly a manager that demands work rate from his forwards either. That's a very good point. There will be some managers that expect their forwards to be the pressing, the focal point for the team. But then you've got coaches where they know that those type of caliber of players who are sensational in front of goal, but may not have the desire to contribute in terms of the defensive part of the game. You have to work around those players, and that's why you know Ancelotti will have more defensive-minded midfielders rather than attack-minded midfielders in his team to cover the ground for those players and let them do the business up top. That's how it goes. So that's why I feel like it's a little bit harsh that Rodrigo doesn't have the work rate, but Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Kieran says we could make Rodrigo more of a team player under the slot if there is any doubt with his work rate. I feel like, with some players, when they've been at a club for quite a long time, every day just feels like a normal day. Whereas if you are frustrated and you feel like you need to move on, you need a new challenge, that's what might spur him on to come to a new club and have a new energy where he's excited, he's energetic. The coach has presented his vision for the player, like Arne Slot has done with Verts and Ekitike, and he's blown away by it. So you always hear about certain players and certain coaches where you know players will leave and go to other clubs, but they seem to have a special connection with certain coaches, and they'll run through a brick wall for them. This might be the case with Arne Slot's that kind of coach where he breathes that confidence in you, and you want to do everything you can to impress him, but also help the team in any shape or form. So for me, I feel like Arne Slot is probably the coach to get the best out of him because he's got the tactical nous, and I'm sure he knows what Rodrigo brings to the table and can help increase his impact even further. So let's see. But I do expect Rodrigo to be our number one target um, once we get some clarification about Luis Diaz's move away from the club. Hamza, big up Hamza. He said, "Would you take Ruben Diaz at Liverpool?" Just based on players' ability wise, yes, I think he'd be a good signing for us, but I don't think it would be a reality. Of course, him being a Man City player, they wouldn't sell him to us because we're a rival. Um, if there was some sort of indication that they would be open to doing a deal, I think he'd have a crazy salary, which we might not want to invest in a defender. We probably want our attackers to earn that kind of salary bracket. So, but in terms of as a player, I don't think he's been as great as he was when he first entered the Premier League. Still a good player though, still a solid defender in my opinion. So I would take him in terms of ability wise, but I don't think that's a deal that would ever pan out. But ability wise, I still think he's a solid defender. Buffalo Soldier says the thing is, why is Rodrigo always gets benched? He's that good. He's got people like Vinicius and Mbappe in front of him. That's how I see it. You'd always select Vinicius Junior and Mbappe ahead of Rodrigo. And in terms of the right wing, that's the position he plays, but it's not his favorite role. So when you're being a makeshift player or you're asked to do a role that isn't really your game or your preference, then you don't tend to get the best out of them. So that's why I don't think he, you know, plays to his maximum ability. And I feel like because he's a bit of a bit part player at Real Madrid, we don't get to see his true talent. So let's see. I think if he was to become a Liverpool signing, I think it would be a good addition to the squad. Um, but it'll be interesting because I do feel like we have to. There's no way we don't target a left winger. We need to get a left winger into the squad. So it'll be interesting to see who we target as Luis Diaz's replacement. Hamza says you must choose one: Alexander, Isak, or Rodrigo. I said Isak earlier on, but Rodrigo would bring the right balance to the team because I feel like we need cover for that left wing position. But I'd say Isak. I really would. I might cheat in this situation because we've been linked with Malick Fofana as a Chiesa replacement. So if we sign Isak, then you have Isak, Ekitike, your two strikers, and then Fofana could be the player that covers the left wing and right wing. So it'll be a cover for Gakpo and Salah. So I feel like that's adequate quality there. So in that scenario, I'd go for Isak. But if it was just based on the two players, who would be the right fit currently, it'd probably be Rodrigo because we've signed Ekitike in terms of our new striker now. So we need to sign a left winger to replace Diaz, and that would be Rodrigo. But my preference, Isak all day long. Um, Hooks Law says I'm more interested in Isak. Totally agree. Felix says I still think Diaz can stay. You never know. He's not really. he he's of course said a few things in the media where it hasn't appeased local fans. You know, he said that he's had discussions with other clubs. I feel like he's come to a point where he's very frustrated with his situation because he's not received a new contract since he's been at the club. And that's quite bizarre as well. Normally, after one or two good seasons, you're presented with a new contract. But I think when that second season occurred, that's when he picked up the serious injury. So because of that, Liverpool didn't feel like it was wise to give him a new contract. And last season ended up being his best season to date at Liverpool. So naturally, you would assume he would get a new contract now because of the efforts that he produced for us last season. But due to his age and profile, I think the club think it might be best to sell him on, try and get as much money as we can because there's interest from Saudi who are willing to spend big. Bayern Munich are a team that are in desperate need of signing a left-sided attacker. So, the ball's in Liverpool's court. They can, be a bit more patient and try and get the best deal possible. If he stays, I'll be honest with you, Felix, I would not be annoyed about that at all. I really like Diaz. I think he would be a very important figure for us next season if he remain at the club. It all comes down to him. If he's willing to stay, I don't think. Well, I can't say for sure, but I think most Liverpool fans wouldn't be too displeased about that. So I would rather he stay. But because there's been so much noise about him leaving and him wanting to leave, it just seems like that's going to be the most likely scenario this summer. Kieran says Rodrygo wasn't getting benched in the league that much. I don't think recently he hasn't played because his future isn't settled and he's unhappy at Madrid at the moment. That's correct. So I was just referencing, in terms of recent games. But of course, last season, yeah, he was very involved in the Real Madrid team. I think he's got a great record against English teams in terms of the number of goals he scored over the years. So no, for me, he's shown that he has the quality. I just haven't seen enough to say that he's elite. I don't put him in that bracket. When I say someone's elite, I'm not going to backtrack that statement. That person should remain in that category. I don't think he's quite there, but that doesn't mean I won't change my opinion, or that doesn't mean he can't become that player in the future. So if he becomes a Liverpool player, then he gets my full support, and I will be gladly proven wrong that he is world class. So let's see what happens with Rodrigo, but it looks like he is our number one target, so I expect us to make an approach, I would say, at some point in the next week or two. Um, and of course, there is a lot of competition. Yeah, there certainly is. Hamza with the comment says, how many trophies do you think Liverpool will win next season? How much will you be happy with? I'll give you an answer now, but do ask me this question after the window as well, because that will be, my sort of final answer, because I want to see what other business we do in this window. Right now, I feel like we win the league. I feel like we could do the double and to us winning the Champions League as well. Maybe I'm sounding a bit far-fetched here. And maybe the double. That's what something would please me. That's what I think we can win. I think we'll go far in the domestic competitions as well. But look, if we sign Rodrigo, Gehi, no, if I'm going to say Isak, then we're going for the quad. So I'm going to be shameless, and I will say we will go for the quad. We will win the quad. Um, that's what I'm waiting on. That's what I'm waiting for us to add another defender because we need cover in that area. I think that's an area where we're a bit slim in. Um, if Diaz goes, then you need a replacement automatically. So that's what I'm saying. Ask me at the end of the window, but I feel like we're favourites for the title, 100%. I'm not going to change that opinion at all. I think we're favourites to win the Premier League, so we're going to go back to back, which is something that I really want us to achieve. I think the Champions League, I feel like we can really go far and potentially win it. So that's why I'm going for the double. That's what I'm going for. So let me know what you think. What would be your prediction for next season? How happy would you be, in terms of what we can achieve? Kieran says, I don't think Rodrigo's been happy in the position he has been playing in either. He's predominantly played on the right side, and he's shown a decent account of himself, but I think he likes to play from the left because his game is, ball to feet. He likes to cut in and then take shots or thread through balls from that kind of, left-sided central position. So I think that's his natural game. That's probably why he's wanting a move away from the club, where he's not really been given a chance to play in his favorite role. So that's why I think he's trying to get a move away from Real Madrid. And Kieran says, yeah, I totally agree that Rodrygo is an elite. Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think some fans will say he is elite. I'm not quite there. I don't think he is, but he can become that player. Why not? There's no reason to say that you can't become that player. He has the talent, he has the ability. So for me, if he moves over to a club that gives him the platform to be the player he wants to be, then he can definitely progress and become one of the best players in world football. Kieran says, my prediction is that we win the league and one of the domestic cups. I'll be more than happy with just the league, though. Yeah, I really want us to win the league. That is the minimum. I want us to go back to back. And then I feel like the Champions League, we would have learned our mistakes from last year. I feel like we can really go at it again. Of course, PSG would be favourite based on what they did last season, but I feel like we can definitely give them a run for their money. I feel like we've got that much talent in our squad now where, you know, it would be an exciting prospect for Liverpool. So I'm going for the double. That would be my prediction, but that's also what I really want as well. Of course, the obvious will be go for all of the trophies, right? But those are the two that I think we can really, really, go all in and uh, try and claim at the end of the season. Hamza says, "Hey, apparently just now PSG have put in €100 million bid for Rodrygo." Wow, okay. That is funny because we spoke about this a few days ago, and I just presented it as a scenario. I didn't really say that it could happen, but it looks like it could be. So the scenario that I presented a few days ago was that Rodrigo is definitely looking to move from Real Madrid, and one of the teams that showed early interest in this window was PSG. But PSG wouldn't sign Rodrigo if a player doesn't develop because they're quite fully stocked in that attacking area. And one player that is my dream signing, my number one choice for left wing is Barcola. So if that is a genuine thing that's happened, then that means Barcola should be for sale, right? That is what you would assume. So I'm not going to backtrack and be like, oh yeah, thank God, he's going over there. Um, my first choice is Barcola. That is the player I would want to replace Diaz because I feel like Barcola offers more in certain aspects of his game to Rodrigo. For example, Barcola is someone that is better on the wings where he's great in one-on-one situations, but he's got raw pace, so he can outpace the fullback. He will attack from behind. His finishing could improve because I feel like he can be erratic at times, and I think that's where Rodrigo's a little bit better. Having more composure in front of goal. So I would rather go for Barcola rather than Rodrigo. But because I assumed that Rodrigo was the one available, that's why I've been speaking about him in a lot more detail. But my choice, and you guys know my choice, Barcola would be my first choice to replace Luis Diaz. So if that is, true, or if there's any, weight to that rumor, then yeah, we'll have another talking point tomorrow because that's groundbreaking news there. So let's see. Let's see if this news or this rumor develops in the next 24 hours. Um, Kieran says, "Give me the league every season, and I'm happy as Larry." 100% agree with you there, Kieran. Callum says, "I'll be happy with either the league or the UCL and one domestic cup." Yeah, that's a fair point. The league is a must. That's definitely the trophy we have to win. I would like for us to just go for the double at least. But when you say if you can, why not go for the treble as well? But for me, a double of Premier League and Champions League would be a great achievement for us next season. Um, Buffalo Soldier says if he was elite, he would be in the lineup every week and not get bench simples. Yeah, that's why I don't regard him as elite. That, and I've said that quite a few times. I think he's a good player, just not in that category. But you'll always have discussions with certain fans, and a lot of fans I've seen online rate him very, very highly. I'm just not on that boat, so no. I think you're probably of the same opinion as well. Callum says, I'm more for the Champions League. I love that trophy, man. I hear you. Because there's a real prestige when you win that Champions League. The whole world's watching you. But for me, the bread and butter is the Premier League. And I want us to surpass Manchester United. I want us to get number 21. We've got 20, we've matched them, but let's keep going. Let's try and get as many titles under our belt and just add a bit more of a gap. Um, because we're on the up right now. They're trying to buy certain players here and there. They've got a lot of work to do before they even come to Liverpool's level. So in the meantime, let's try and win as many trophies. Let's build our legacy even further. And yeah, let's just add more trophies to the cabinet as well. So for me, of course, as a fan, you say you want to win all of the trophies, but for me, the Premier League is the number one priority. That's the one that I really want us to win next season. Kieran asks, would you rather win the league or win the UCL and FA Cup? For me, it's the league. I know it's two trophies, so I think that adds more sort of quantity into the how many trophies you won in that season. But I want us to win that number 21. So for me, in that scenario, I'm going for the Premier League title again. Uh, Philly says no offers for Darwin so far. None in Europe interested. I think that's because of our valuation. We want, I think, upwards of £50 million, and there's not many clubs that are willing to spend that kind of money on Darwin Núñez. So therefore, we could be pricing him out. He'll probably have to think twice now. There is interest from Saudi, and they're willing to spend 70 plus million on him. So if he feels like he's at an age or he's at a stage of his career or life where he needs to think about, you know, receiving that big paycheck, before his career comes to an end. Of course, he's still young, but you still have to, think about the future to an extent. Then a move to Saudi wouldn't be a worst case scenario. Um, if there's no interest in Europe, he has to look at the options available. And I think Darwin Núñez to Saudi wouldn't be the worst case scenario because he'll play in a league where I feel like he will smash in the goals. And if he does well, he can always return back to Europe. John Duran was there for a few months. Now he's back at Turkey, isn't he? So just because they move over to Saudi doesn't mean they never come back. They can still come back. It's just based on their current situation and how well they've done at the club or not. So they can still move on in the future. So I think a move to Saudi for the short term would be a good situation for him, for Liverpool, for the Saudi team. Everyone's winning. Everyone's a winner in that scenario. So let's hope that happens in due course. Um, Spirit of LSD fans, Migo. So he says, Joel Kwanzaa is better than Charlie Cresswell. I haven't seen much of Charlie Cresswell, to be fair. But if he is, then yeah, I wouldn't want to sign him anyway. If he's not an upgrade on Kwanzaa, then what's the point? So I'll take your judgment on that. Uh, Cannon says, Felix, can you blame there? No. Do you know what's funny? Because I feel like in certain leagues he would actually cook. Like he would do amazing in Serie A and La Liga as well. So there's certain teams that I feel like would actually suit his skill set really well. The Napoli move, I thought that was the perfect match. You've got a very passionate fan base there, and you've got a very aggressive player in Darwinis, and I feel like that would have been a great match for player in the club. But unfortunately, we've pretty much prized them away from that. Atletico Madrid is another club, but they don't look like they're in the market for another striker. So options are a bit more limited now. In the Premier League, he could still move to a club like a Newcastle if they needed to sign another striker, which they do because they've only got Isak right now. Isak's future is still quite uncertain or up in the air, and so they'll need to figure out their situation with Isak, but they still have space in the squad. Callum Wilson's left, so they don't have a backup striker or a striker to challenge Isak in that number one striker role. So let's see. But do I blame them? Not really. But I'm trying to sell the player on. I'm trying to get as many eyes on the player because I need that move to happen this summer so we can reinvest that money into the squad even further. So yeah, let's see what happens. Um, Mazzy, big up yourself, Mazzy says, Ozzy, I just came on your show anyways. The Isak situation is getting very interesting. How do you feel in, bro? My prediction is that I think he ends up at Saudi. It's not the right move. So don't get me wrong, it's not what I want for the player. I think he ends up going there because Newcastle aren't going to match him in terms of that 300k per week request there. Liverpool, I feel like as much as we rate the player, because we've signed Ekitike, I don't think we'll be in the market for that caliber of a striker now. And thirdly, his agents made a few comments in the last 2 3 days that indicates that they're trying to engineer the best move for his client. And I'm speaking from a financial point of view. That's the inkling that I'm getting. So it's got Saudi written all over it. And we also found out a few days ago that um that I think Al Hilal was given permission to speak to Isak. So if that's the case, then it looks like they would be the front runners to sign Isak. So I think he'll end up at Saudi. He'll get the big salary that he wants. Newcastle gets a big transfer fee out of it as well, and they'll try and improve on their squad, and they'll take it from there. So let's see what happens. That's not the best case scenario for Liverpool, unfortunately, because we don't get our prime target. Newcastle get a huge chunk of money, and they're able to compete in the Champions League, but they can probably challenge for a top four position from even more so this season. Yeah, so it's not the best scenario for Liverpool, but I'm trying to give you my honest opinion. I'm not here to just give you biased opinions here. I think that's what's going to end up happening. If we get Isak, yeah, rest assured we will be celebrating. Um, and yeah, you know how I celebrate. I bring the shisha out when I do celebrational shows on Football Talk podcast. So yeah, that's definitely going to happen if we get Isak. Hooks Law says we already have the most Champions League in England, don't we? Leagues should come first. We do. In terms of English teams, we do have the most. Um, and we've matched Manchester United in regards to 20 league titles. So for me, it would just be that sweet moment to surpass that number of 20 and become 21, champions of England. So that's what I would want as well. So yeah, I agree. But the Champions League does have a nice ring to Champions of Europe as well. So, you know, we'll see. I wouldn't mind either, to be honest with you. But Premier League would definitely be my first choice. Kieran says, I was watching Slow Sports News yesterday, and someone on the panel said Nicholas Jackson is a better player than Ekitike, and Chelsea asking price of 80 million to 100 million is a justified price based on that. Um, I'll be honest with you, that is complete nonsense. Nicholas Jackson is nowhere near the level of Ekitike. I'm not just saying that because Liverpool are on the verge of signing him. Uh, Ekitike is probably on the same wavelength as Darwin Núñez. I think that's their league. That's that caliber. They're not in the league of Ekitike. Ekitike is a player that he's on the cusp of becoming a top player in Europe. And in 2 3 years down the line, if he continues to progress, he'll be renowned as one of the best strikers in world football. That's the kind of potential he has. He's not just a player that is decent. He's a player of high value, high potential, and that's why Liverpool in the market to sign him. So Nicholas Jackson, he's nowhere near that kind of caliber. And the reason why Chelsea want 80 to 100 million pounds is because we've spent that kind of money for Ekitike, and they're using that as a benchmark to try and generate as much funds as possible. That's the only reason why they valued him at that. And of course, they've got Manchester United as one of the strong front runners to sign Jackson. And United are renowned for just offering whatever money it takes. I feel like they have a blank checkbook at times, but that never works out for them in the end. So that's why they've upped the price because they know Manchester United will be willing to spend whatever it takes to get a new striker through the door. So I completely disagree with that. And I'm hoping Ekitike will show that this season, what he brings to the table. I think people are underestimating how good he is, and that's because people haven't watched him much. I've watched him during the season because we weren't just linked to him 2 3 weeks ago. We've been linked to him since top of the year since January, and I've made an effort to watch him in the Europa League. So I watched him playing for so I watched him playing against Tottenham in the Europa League. I remember Turkey was playing, so I was doing a Turkey watch as well because I thought we were going to sign him. But those were the two players that I was watching for in the Europa League campaigns. And for me, I feel like there's definitely a player that has huge potential. Um, he's a different profile to a lot of strikers out there. He's got an amazing all-round game. A link-up play, I think we'll see it this season in a Liverpool shirt. People will understand, why we've gone for that type of profile of a striker because he's a 9.5 almost, where he can drop deep, but he can also be a prolific striker as well. So for me, I'm excited by the prospect of Ekitike. In terms of the comparison, yeah, complete nonsense in my opinion. Um, Seriously, couldn't believe what I was listening to. Yeah, I'm surprised you were listening to it in the first place. I would have just shut it off straight away. So yeah, crazy talk there. Callum says hooks. The UCO is the biggest trophy in club football. There is no greater prize. Agree to an extent, but because Liverpool haven't won so many league titles in recent history, us Liverpool fans, we want to see what happened in the 70s, what happened in the 80s. We want to see that firsthand. We won the Champions League, of course, in 2025. Of course, we won it a few years ago with Jurgen Klopp. But for me, the Premier League's the bread and butter. That's how I see it. And I just want us to build our history by surpassing all the English teams like United and just extending that, even further. But the Champions League is a special trophy. Whenever we've won it, it's been crazy celebrations. Unfortunately, we've lost a few finals as well, so we've had a few heartbreaks in the way as well. But it is a special tournament, don't get me wrong. But for me, uh, league first and then Champions League after. In terms of like priority, I think you should always try and win your league first, and then you can, try your best to win the Champions League as well. So it is the biggest trophy, I agree. But I want us to win the Premier League next season. That's my sort of main goal for the team. Kieran says Nick Jackson is worth 50 million max. In this market, yes, because the striker market isn't great. So yeah, 40, 50 million sounds about right. I'd probably say 50 is probably the most. But if you compare it to what they paid for João Pedro, which was the same amount of money, João Pedro is much better than Jackson. So in that regards, I'd probably bring it down to 40 million. I don't think Jackson's that good. Decent, but for me, kind of like another Nunes where very raw, very erratic, not a consistent performer. So for me, yeah, not the forward that I'd want anywhere near my club, that's for sure. Spirit of LFC fans says, are there any forward players who are capable of playing both left wing and right wing positions? Also, both foot players. Turkey, he would have been one. He would have been the perfect one in that scenario. Um, there's a player that I really like. He plays for Monaco. His name's Akuluche. So he's predominantly left-footed, but he's both-footed to an extent, but naturally more left-footed. Plays on the right, can play on the left, and can play as a number 10. He's the next one that's going to break through in France. That's the player that I've seen, and I'm very, very impressed with what he's bringing to the table. So PSG will actually link to him, and apparently there's a lot of teams that have been quiet about the player, where we just don't know who those teams are right now. So that would be someone that fits the mold that you just mentioned. But it, you know, we can think. Let's exclude that last part in terms of being a both foot player because that's very rare as well in this day and age where you got someone that's good with both feet. Malick Fofana would be a decent option for us to replace with Chiesa because he's capable of playing left wing and right wing. Um, but the Akaluche fella, he looks good. So if you haven't seen him, watch a few compilations on YouTube and you'll probably see what I see. I think they're very special talent. Hooks Law says Rara take over United's league title. I agree. I think that's the aim right now to try and surpass them even further. Mike says there is no connection with PSG and Rodrygo so far. LFC are chatting to his representatives, but no club talk negotiations yet. That is very true. That is what I mentioned earlier in the show. So we're speaking to his reps to find out if their client is interested in a move to Liverpool, And once we get that indication, that's when we make that official bid. Um, so right now, we don't know because Rodrygo might be like, no, I don't want to join Liverpool. I don't want to move to England. I want to move to Italy, where the weather's nice, like, or I want to remain in Spain. So maybe I'll go to a different club. Who knows? Because Barcelona were linked to him yesterday. So that would be a crazy turn of events if he moves over to Barcelona. It would be that whole Luis Figo scenario from all those years ago. But let's see where he ends up this summer. AR says, hi, Aussie and chat. Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum to you, AR. This is how you like, comment, share, and subscribe. You never walk alone. Big up, AR. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for tuning in. Raja Painting says, how do you feel about Malick Fofana potentially replacing Chiesa? How good is Fofana? I think that's a good replacement for Chiesa. In terms of technical ability, he's not on the same wavelength as Chiesa, but what he has above Chiesa is raw speed. He's more tenacious, he's more aggressive. He attacks the fullback better than Chiesa. He attacks behind the defense, so he'll stretch teams whenever we play. And he's very comfortable playing on the left and on the right wing. So for me, he gives us that power of you know pure speed on the wings and especially off the bench. I don't think he'll be a starter for us, but he'll be a good option for us from the bench. So for me, I think it would be a smart signing. He shouldn't cost a lot. He'd probably cost around 20, 25 million pounds. So that would be a good deal, in my opinion. So let's see, if there's any truth to that rumor. AR said Isak and Ekitike, similar style of play. They are. Of course, Isak's accomplished now, whereas Ekitike's sort of walking towards that kind of level. But I feel like Ekitike has more to his game, so he could maybe, if he's able to work hard and accomplish what he wants, can actually surpass Isak because he's got more to his game. And I saw a comment that he made in an interview that he models his game to Karim Benzema, which is music to my ears because if we get that kind of play in our team, we've got a very, very special talent in our hands. Felix says, hard to see a Chiesa fully recovered. It won't happen. That is the sad side, unfortunately. I think he'll definitely have, good spells during the season for a team, but he won't be the dynamic winger that we saw those years back. So yeah, unfortunately, I feel like you have a point there. AR says, what's happening with Simicast, Ramsey, Williams, Owen Beck, Elliott, Morton, Bashtic, Doak, Nunes, Diaz, and Chiesa. Simicast is gone a bit quiet on his front in terms of him moving away from the club. Maybe he remains at the club next season. I think he'll probably be sold. I don't see us having too many left backs in the squad, so I think he'll end up leaving. Ramsey forever injured, so we'll be lucky to get a loan move out of him. Williams, he'll be sold. Owen Beck currently in negotiations with a loan move to Derby County, so that will most likely be his destination next season. Elliott, I would like him to stay, but I think he will be sold this summer for around 40 odd million pounds. Morton, I think he will also be sold as well. Bastich, if we get a strong bid from Spain, I think he will depart as well. Ben Doak, his stock is quite high, so I think there's a long list of clubs willing to place a bid for him, so I can see him departing this summer. Darwiners expect him to leave. Diaz expect him to leave, and unfortunately, Chiesa he'll leave as well. Uh, Hook's Law says crazy if he goes Saudi, unlikely to see out a Saudi contract. He won't see out that contract. He will play there, and I think, yeah, that's a crazy one, isn't it? Like, who would buy him after that? Probably us, if we really needed firepower in the end. And I don't know if I'm looking into this situation a bit too much, but because Newcastle and Al Hilal are both owned by, the Saudi government funds, there might be a connection there where, if Newcastle want to sign him again in the future, that could be a possibility as well. So, bit of dodginess in that kind of scenario. But we live in a football world where things like that do happen. So, um, it would be crazy if he goes to Saudi. I don't think he should, but with the money offering, maybe it might be too hard for him to refuse. Andrew, big up Andrew says, so PSG have bidded for Rodrygo. If he goes PSG and we don't get Isak, I would be disappointed. I hear you because obviously we've set that expectation that we're going to sign one or the other. Um, if we don't go for either, I would like us to go for Barcola because if Rodrygo goes to PSG, they need to sell one of their attackers. And I think Barcola would be the one they'd want to part ways with to an extent. So I think that would be the target that I would look into this summer. Uh, oh, remember Darby. So he says Michael Jackson has some chance of top scorer in Premier League, as does Nicholas Jackson. Big up yourself with that comment. Uh, Ranjit Painting says Alexander Isak is a great goal scorer. He'll get minimum 25 Premier League goals for us, but a 25-year-old is not worth 130 million. We're not signing prime Neymar. There's still sort of a risk in regards to signing Isak. One, his injury record isn't the best. He has sort of played more games in the last 2 3 years, but that would still be a bit of a concern. 130 million is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, that is the market now. That is the price range of signing a top striker. Let's be honest, there aren't many top strikers around in world football, so therefore you're going to have to pay inflated prices to get that caliber of a striker to your team. So that's why Liverpool were interested in it, but Newcastle don't seem to be wanting to do any business. So we'll see what happens with Isak in the end. Kieran with another comment says, I never watched Sky Sports News, but it was on TV at the time. At that moment, I remembered whilst watching it a few years ago, switched off immediately. Yeah, I hear you. It can be, yeah. I always feel like they have narratives when it comes to certain players and certain teams, and yeah, it can get a bit jarring sometimes. Bob Mark, pick up yourself, Bob. He says, don't mind Rodrigo, but don't need him. We have Gakpo and Rio for the left, and even Ekitike could cover on the left if needed. We need Isak. Now, in terms of Rio being in that mix, I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid. He has a talent, don't get me wrong, but let's not put too much pressure on him and let's not make him the backup for Gakpo because let's say we start the season and Gakpo is injured or is unavailable to throw in a 16-year-old in the first team in that kind of situation is not wise. Unfortunately, it could impact his long-term career. So no, I'd want it to be where we have two top quality left wingers, and he's like the third left winger, third choice left winger. And if we need him, we might play him here and there. Or we'll play him in the domestic cups. That would be the best case scenario. Ekitike to cover left wing. He has played there, but that was very early in his career. Since he's moved from PSG and then over to Frankfurt, he's predominantly established himself as a striker. So he can play in that role, but I wouldn't want him to be sort of a mainstay in that position or utilizing that role. I feel like his strength is playing in a more central position because of his link up play and what he brings to the table. He'll attack the channels, but not playing on the left wing where that is your standing position. That's not where it should be. So, in my opinion, so we need Isak. Yes, of course, everyone needs an Isak in their team. I think because we've got Ekitike and we've regarded him as the main striker, then there is no sort of requirement to add another striker of Isak's caliber because let's say Isak does join, that puts Ekitike on the bench, and I don't think that would be fair on him. So the best case scenario would be to start Ekitike and then sign another attacker that would be either equal level in terms of quality or can provide the strength and depth in that position. But let's see. I would love for Isak to come. That's my dream sign right there. I just don't think it'll be a reality, unfortunately. Um, Andrew says Bob Isak or Rodrigo with another attacker and centre back to finish in the window. Bob Mark says, I personally believe Isak wants to move. I agree with that. I think he does as well. But he also doesn't mind staying at Newcastle for another year. The only way he leaves if he hands a transfer request, which I believe he won't do. And you said that he's not that type of guy. Well, currently, I can't rule that out because he's already expressed his demands financially what he wants, which is 300k a week at Newcastle, and they're not going to offer that. So he's trying to prize himself away from the club because that would mean Newcastle need to find suitors because they can't afford to give him that contract. And if he doesn't get what he wants, he will probably, be a bit stroppy during the season and might not play to his capability. So you've got a striker that's frustrated and annoyed with the club and wouldn't perform to his highest level. So then you have to think, what's the best case scenario? You've got a team in Liverpool that's shown strong interest in him. You've even got the likes of Arsenal, but they're signing Eucharist, so they're not in the mix anymore. And you've got a team in Al Hilal that are willing to break the bank and spend whatever money is needed to get Isak over to the Middle East. So that's why I predicted that I think that's where he'll end up. I would love for it to be Liverpool. I just don't see it being a reality, unfortunately. Um, Kieran says, "Have you ever had someone else on the channel, as in a collab on a live stream?" Yeah, I've had plenty of collabs. I think due to a lot of transfers being done in terms of my schedule and stuff, um, I'm doing more impromptu shows rather than scheduled shows. So once the season starts, um, I'll have a bit more of a structure where it's more scheduled in terms of fixtures coming up, in terms of the Premier League, Champions League, and all the competitions that Liverpool will be involved in. So once the season starts, we'll have a bit more structure. So that's when I normally invite more content creators on the show. So I do more collabs. So expect to see, you know, familiar faces and more Liverpool content creators during the course of next season. So yes, make sure to be on the lookout for that. Andrew says, I understand, but we need a big player to finish the forward line. If Nunes, Diaz, and Chiesa can't hope on Gakpo, Salah, Ekitike, but need one more big player. Rodrygo Isak to win the league. I think in terms of what we want in the team, Rodrygo would make the most sense because he adds balance. He will be that Diaz replacement. If he moves on to Bayern Munich or Saudi or wherever he ends up. So Isak, of course, would be the right signing, but I feel like why would we spend 80 million on a backup? We could have just signed another player at a sort of a lower price range and then have signed Isak and then have signed a Rodrigo as well. So that's just my inkling. I don't want it to feel like Ekitike is just coming to be a backup player. I feel like he's been presented with the project to be the main man at Liverpool, and I feel like that's only right that he's given the chance to do that. So that's why you know maybe I'm being like Jurgen Klopp right now. Maybe I'm adding a bit too much sentiment in this situation here. Maybe I should be a bit more cutthroat and think, you know what, who cares? We want best players in our team, so we should have Isak and Ekitike. So if it happens, of course, I'm over the moon. But I just feel like that's not going to happen this summer. Mane says, Ozzy, which front line would cook more? Salah, Ekitike, Rodrigo, or Salah, Isak with Ekitike on the left wing? Mm, that's an interesting question. I might edge it with Salah, Ekitike, and Rodrigo only because I think it's got a better balance. And with the other one, you got Salah and Isak, they'll be banging the goals. But on the left with Ekitike, I don't think he will. You never know, actually. I'd go for, yeah, I'm definitely split on this one because I feel like both lineups will produce the goods. In one situation, there you've got a striker that we don't know will be prolific in the Premier League, and in another scenario, he's playing in an out of position. So I'm gonna go for my initial reaction. That's Salah, Ekitike, and Rodrigo. So feel free to let me know what you think. Um, Andrew says I want back to back with Salah leaving for Mark needs someone to step up. Yeah, back to back definitely is what we want as well. Hooks Law says if he ain't on Newcastle's playing tomorrow, that's more fuel to the fire. Also, they're going on tour tomorrow. That is a very interesting point, Hooks. I'm definitely going to be making a note of that. If he's not there, you never know. He could be Liverpool bound. Um, Raji Penty said Ozzy Hugo Ekitike is a genuine baller. He's got the ability to do a mad season because he'll play with better players at LFC, so he can show his full potential. I agree. That's why I'm very excited about his prospect of joining Liverpool. I feel like he'll definitely fulfill his potential. I think he'll definitely surprise a lot of fans next season. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in action. Hookslaw says Ekitike could play left wing. He could. But I don't think that's his game anymore. When he was coming through the ranks, he was a very quick player. Well, he's still quick, but as in his natural game was to attack the channels from a left wing position. But as he's developed, he's pretty much polished up other areas of his game that's allowed him to play more centrally. And I think his link up play is something that really makes him stand out from other strikers in world football. So if you've got a player that has that kind of ability, you're wasting his talent by playing on the left wing. He's better utilized in a central position and playing um, as a striker. I just thought of a scenario which might sound crazy, but it could be a possibility. If we were to sign Isak and Ekitike, could we play Isak up top, Salah on the right, Verts on the left, and Ekitike as a number 10? I know number 10 isn't his predominant position, but he would virtually be like a false nine in that number 10, if that makes sense. So he'll be doing the link up play that I've just mentioned. That could work. That could add the right balance. It might not. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I feel like that could actually work because he's that type of striker. But then I feel like because of his natural game, he ends up finding himself in a more advanced position, or it ends up becoming a 4-4-2. Would Liverpool play a 4-4-2? I don't think that would be the predominant formation throughout the season, but it could be an option we have based on the opposition. So who knows? That's why I've not completely dismissed the idea in my head that Isak could be the signing. But look, if Liverpool place an offer and it looks like we're trying to speed roll that deal to happen very, very soon, then yeah, we can talk about that formation or that setup a bit more detail. It could work. It'll be very attack minded, but it could work. So let's see. Let's see what happens. Just something that popped in my head there as we were talking. Um, and that is the last comment, and that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got some new uh, comments from a lot of different people too. So big up everyone for joining in. I gave some shouts earlier on, but I'll continue to give to the ones that I didn't mention earlier on. So shout out to Spirit of LFC fans, shout out to Hooks Law, shout out to AR, shout out to Mazzy, shout out to Raji Painting, shout out to Andrew Wright, shout out to Ilma, shout out to Bob, and shout out to Andrew as well. Appreciate everyone's engagement. Yeah, great show today. Lots of discussions about different points. Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens this week because I feel like we are going to get further development. Just got a comment from Hookslow who says, um, Verts be out of position a little bit, but I feel like he can play on that left hand side. He's done it for Bayer Leverkusen, and whenever he's played centrally, he tends to drift on that left hand side. So and I feel like he can play that as a standing position as well. So just trying to fit the pieces in the puzzle, to make sure we can have a team where all of these players can play in the same lineup. So who knows? It could be an option going forward. Irfan says, hi, very so Irfan, thank you for your comment. Thank you for tuning in. Kieran saying, thanks for the stream. See you next time. Good night. Big up yourself, Kieran. And Cook's Law says, cheers as well. So yeah, thank you for everyone for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow with another transfer show around 10, 11 p.m. And then we'll speak about any developments that take place. So yeah, should be an exciting time for us. And I'm sure we'll get some developments regarding Diaz, Gehi, and probably expecting something from Isak as well. So let's see what happens. But until next time, guys, thank you for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.